In the 1960s, being poor was reflected in the things you owned. Families struggling to make ends meet found creative ways to stretch every dollar, repurpose everyday items, and make do with what they had, so owning these things meant you were poor in the 60s. Before the days of fast fashion and overflowing department stores, families living in poverty had to get creative with what they wore. When money was tight, fabric wasn't something you could just pick up at the store. It had to be found wherever possible. That's where flour sack clothing came in. Large sacks used to package flour, sugar, and feed for livestock were carefully washed, cut, and sewn into dresses, shirts, and even undergarments. If it had fabric, it had potential. For many families, store-bought fabrics were simply too expensive, so they had no choice but to turn packaging into wardrobe essentials. Manufacturers quickly caught on, printing sacks with colorful floral designs, polka dots, and even instructions for making children's clothes. It wasn't exactly high fashion, but at least it made poverty look a little more cheerful. Of course, these clothes had to last, and when they started to wear out, repairs were inevitable. Patching up a dress was just part of daily life. And if a child outgrew their outfit, well, it became a hand-me-down, patched one more time and given another chance at life. Waste wasn't an option, and neither was vanity. A good pair of shoes was a luxury many families simply couldn't afford. When soles wore thin and holes started forming, there was no running to the store for a replacement. Instead, resourceful parents turned to the most affordable insole money couldn't buy: cardboard. Slipped inside worn-out shoes, it provided just enough coverage to keep feet off the pavement, at least until rain turned it into a soggy mess. This wasn't a short-term fix. It was a reality for many struggling households. When shoes were passed down from one sibling to the next, they weren't always in the best shape. Cardboard became a quick, makeshift patch, extending the life of footwear that had already seen better days. If the cardboard wore through, you didn't throw out the shoe, you just added another layer. For children, wearing patched-up shoes was a constant reminder of hard times. Shoestrings were replaced with twine, soles were reinforced with whatever was handy, and walking carefully to keep the cardboard in place became second nature. It may not have been comfortable, but it was practical. And for those who lived through it, there was no mistaking the sound of cardboard shifting inside a shoe, one step at a time. A bare wooden floor in the winter was a daily reminder that store-bought carpets were out of reach. That's where homemade rag rugs came in. When money was tight, no scrap of fabric ever went to waste. Old dresses, worn-out shirts, and even frayed bed sheets found a second life, braided and stitched together into something that could soften a hard floor. These rugs provided insulation, covered up damaged floorboards, and added a bit of warmth to drafty homes. Making one was no small task either. It required patience, strong hands, and enough fabric strips to weave together something sturdy. If a rug started coming apart, it wasn't tossed. It was patched, stitched, and reinforced for another year of service. For families who couldn't afford proper carpets, a homemade rag rug was better than nothing. But you could always tell how tough times were by how mismatched the fabric looked. If you had a rug that featured everything from plaid shirts to floral curtains, it wasn't a design choice, it was survival. And if guests asked about the pattern, well, you could always say it was one of a kind. Because just like the family that made it, no two were ever the same. A child's imagination has always been the best toy, but in poor households, it was often the only one. Tin can toys were proof that when store-bought playthings were out of reach, a little creativity went a long way. An empty food can became a car, a drum, a telephone, or whatever a kid could dream up. With a bit of string and a couple of holes, 2 tin cans became an instant communication device. Need a toy truck, a few nails and some bottle caps for wheels, and you had one that could survive even the roughest backyard roads. Even jump ropes could be fashioned from discarded twine, proving that having fun didn't require a trip to the toy store, just some ingenuity and whatever was lying around. Of course, these toys had their risks. If you weren't careful, sharp metal edges could leave behind a souvenir in the form of a nasty cut. but that was just part of growing up tough. Plus, a little tape or a dull kitchen knife could smooth things over. For kids who grew up with tin can toys, it wasn't about what they didn't have. It was about what they could make. And when you've spent hours rolling a can down the street, you never forget the sound. In homes where money was scarce, furniture wasn't something you picked out. It was something you put together. Wooden crates, the same ones used to ship produce and supplies, were turned into chairs, tables, and shelves when proper furniture wasn't an option. If it could hold weight, it could serve a purpose. A stack of crates could transform into a makeshift bookcase, a sturdy coffee table, or even a nightstand. Need a chair? Flip one over and throw a cushion on top. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. And if a crate started falling apart, a few nails and a little determination could keep it functional for a while longer. Owning crate furniture wasn't a style choice, it was a sign of hard times. These weren't rustic, handcrafted pieces made for trendy lofts. They were whatever a family could get their hands on. Unlike store-bought furniture, they came with splinters, uneven legs, and a tendency to wobble under too much weight. Still, they got the job done. And for families who couldn't afford a proper dining set, sitting around a crate table for dinner wasn't unusual, and it was about having a place to gather, eat, and keep moving forward, one repurposed crate at a time. For families struggling to make ends meet, clothing wasn't something you shopped for. It was something you inherited, and hand-me-down clothing was a survival strategy. If an older sibling outgrew a coat, it didn't get thrown out, it got passed down, patched up, and worn until the fabric gave out. Pants with worn-out knees, a few stitches or an iron-on patch could stretch their lifespan. Dresses too short, let out the hem or pair them with longer socks and call it a day. If the fabric was still holding together, there was no reason to waste it. And if it wasn't, well, it became rags for cleaning or stuffing for quilts. It wasn't uncommon for kids to wear clothes that had been passed through multiple siblings, sometimes even from neighbors or cousins. By the time a shirt reached its third or fourth owner, it had a history longer than some family heirlooms. Of course, kids weren't always thrilled about it. Wearing your older brother's old sweater was one thing, wearing it with his name still stitched inside was another. But when new clothes weren't an option, pride had to take a back seat. The only thing that mattered was staying warm, covered, and ready to pass it down again. Winter didn't care if you could afford a new coat. If money was tight, you had one coat, and you made it last. It didn't matter if it fit perfectly or if you'd grow into it. What mattered was that it kept out the cold, or at least most of it. A good winter coat was a long-term investment, often handed down from sibling to sibling or even across generations. If it was too big, you rolled up the sleeves. If it was too small, you layered underneath and hoped for the best. And if it started to wear thin, you stitched, patched, or lined it with anything that could add warmth. Some coats were so well worn, they had stories to tell. The missing buttons? Gone since last Christmas. The frayed cuffs? A battle scar from years of playground snowball fights. But as long as it still had some insulation left, it wasn't going anywhere. Owning just one coat meant making choices. Wear it inside on the coldest nights, or bundle up in blankets and save it for the next day's walk to school. A second coat was a luxury, but a first coat, no matter how worn out, was a necessity you couldn't go without. A good night's sleep wasn't guaranteed when your mattress was filled with straw or newspaper instead of springs and foam. For families who couldn't afford a proper bed, a sack stuffed with whatever was available had to do the job. It wasn't about comfort. It was about having something between you and the hard wooden floor. Straw was the most common choice, but it came with its own challenges. It flattened quickly, poked through the fabric, and if you weren't careful, invited some unwanted guests. Newspaper was another alternative. Layered thick enough, it offered some padding, and in the cold months, it even worked as extra insulation. But turn over too quickly, and you might wake up to the sound of crinkling headlines. These makeshift mattresses didn't last forever. Over time, straw had to be replaced, and newspapers had to be fluffed to keep some cushion. If a family came across old rags or unwanted fabric, those could be added for extra support. The goal wasn't luxury, it was survival. For those who grew up sleeping on one, upgrading to a real mattress wasn't just about comfort, it was about leaving hardship behind. But no matter how soft a bed is now, some memories of sleeping on rustling paper or scratchy straw never fade. When electricity was too expensive or simply unavailable, families had to find another way to keep the dark at bay, and homemade candles became a necessity. Store-bought candles cost money, and when every penny counted, making your own was the only option. Old bacon grease, leftover lard, or even bits of used wax were collected and melted down to create new candles. String or scraps of fabric served as wicks, and whatever container was handy, tin cans, jars, or even hollowed-out potatoes, became makeshift candle holders. It wasn't glamorous, but when the sun went down, it was the difference between getting things done or sitting in darkness. These candles weren't perfect. They burned unevenly, sometimes smoked up the house, and if you weren't careful, the smell of yesterday's fried bacon might linger a little longer than expected. But for families with no other option, flickering candlelight meant the difference between reading a book, finishing chores, or just making it to bed without tripping over furniture. For those who grew up relying on them, candles weren't about setting the mood. They were about getting through the night. And if you ran out of wax, well, the evening ended when the flame did. Simple as that. A coal bucket wasn't just a household item. For many families, it was their only source of heat. Buying coal in bulk was expensive, so instead, people turned to the tracks. Leftover coal scraps from passing trains or factory yards were free for the taking if you were willing to put in the effort. It wasn't an easy job. Families would send children out with buckets, picking through the frozen ground for small chunks of coal, sometimes just enough to keep the stove burning for one more night. If you got lucky, you found enough to heat a whole room. If not, you bundled up in blankets and hoped tomorrow's search would be better. Using whatever was available was just part of life. Coal dust got everywhere, covering walls, clothes, and anything too close to the stove. If the supply ran low, people burned anything that would catch. A few extra newspapers, broken furniture, even old corn cobs. It was dirty, exhausting work, but there wasn't a choice. When the temperature dropped, pride took a back seat to warmth. If scavenging for coal kept the family from freezing, then so be it. The only thing colder than the wind outside was an empty stove. When money was tight, even the simplest household items had to serve more than one purpose. Glass jars weren't just for canning. They were the everyday drinking glasses in homes where store-bought cups were a luxury. If a jar could hold liquid, it was as good as any tumbler. Pickle jars, jelly jars, and mason jars all found their way onto the dinner table, repurposed into cups for water, milk, or whatever was being served. Some even had a bit of the original label still clinging to the glass, a reminder of its first life. If a family was lucky, they had a set of matching jars. More often, it was a collection of whatever hadn't been broken yet. Dropping one wasn't just an accident, it was losing a perfectly good drinking glass. A cracked rim didn't always mean the end of a jar's usefulness either. A little sanding or a careful sip was all it took to keep it in rotation. Nobody thought twice about it. A glass was a glass, no matter what it used to hold. And if guests came over and got handed a jar, well, that was just the way things were. The drink tasted the same, even if the measuring lines were still on the side. A brand new bicycle was a dream for most kids, but for families struggling to get by, a second-hand bike, no matter how battered, was the only option. If it had wheels, it was good enough. If it had pedals, even better. A second-hand bicycle with missing parts wasn't a deal-breaker. It was a challenge to fix. Seats, brakes, and handlebars weren't guaranteed. If the seat was missing, a folded-up towel or an old cushion did the trick. If the brakes were gone, well, stopping became a game of strategy, coasting, dragging your feet, or aiming for the softest patch of grass. And if the chain popped off mid-ride, you flipped the bike over, greased it with whatever was handy, and got back on. A hand-me-down bike often came with years of previous owners and a history of improvised repairs. Bolts didn't always match. Tires were patched more than once. And if something rattled, you just rode faster to drown out the noise. For kids, owning one of these bikes meant freedom. It didn't matter if it had dents, scratches, or handlebars wrapped in electrical tape. If it got you down the street, it was as good as any shiny new model. And if it didn't, well, that's what a good running start was for. A brand new sofa was out of reach for many families, so when furniture started wearing thin, the solution was to cover it up. Plastic slipcovers weren't just for keeping things clean, they were the last line of defense against time, wear, and a household full of kids. For struggling families, furniture had to last as long as possible. If the fabric was torn, springs were poking through, or stuffing was coming out, a thick plastic cover kept everything in place. It wasn't about protecting a pristine couch, it was about keeping an old one from completely falling apart. Of course, plastic slipcovers had their drawbacks. In the summer, sitting on one meant peeling yourself off the couch like a human sticker. In the winter, they were cold and stiff until the room warmed up. But no matter the season, the unmistakable crinkle of plastic was just part of everyday life. If guests came over, they never saw what was underneath. It could have been a decades-old floral print or a seat cushion held together with duct tape. It didn't matter. The plastic kept it all a mystery. And as long as the couch still held up under the weight of a family gathering, replacing it was out of the question. When winter winds slipped through the cracks, there was no fancy insulation to keep the cold out. Newspaper and fabric became makeshift barriers, stuffing window frames, lining walls, and wedging into any gap that let in a draft. It wasn't pretty, but it was better than nothing. A stack of yesterday's news easily became a shield against the bitter air. Layered thick enough, it added just enough warmth to make a difference. Old shirts, torn curtains, and even worn-out blankets were pressed against windows and nailed over doorways. Some houses had walls stuffed with crumpled newspaper, a temporary fix that often became permanent. These homes weren't draft-proof, but they were a little less bone-chilling at night. And if you had a particularly cold spot, you just grabbed more paper, stuffed it in, and hoped for the best. It wasn't uncommon to find last year's headlines tucked between wooden planks or a forgotten comic strip peeking out from the corner of a room. Nobody did it because they wanted to. It was survival, plain and simple. Proper insulation cost money, and when that wasn't an option, you used whatever was available. In the coldest months, a house full of newspaper and fabric was a patchwork of resilience. When a proper bathtub wasn't an option, families turned to what they could find. An old oil drum, cut in half, was often the closest thing to a real tub, and while it wasn't luxurious, it got the job done. If you wanted a warm bath, you had to haul and heat the water yourself, one pot at a time. These makeshift tubs weren't designed for comfort. The metal got scorching hot in the summer and ice cold in the winter, so you learned to ease in carefully. Space was limited, too. For kids, it worked well enough, but for adults, bathing was more of a strategic maneuver than a relaxing soak. Repurposing was key. Some families padded the rim with cloth to prevent sharp edges, while others lined the bottom with an old towel to keep from slipping. If the barrel started rusting, a coat of paint might stretch its usefulness a little longer. Bath time wasn't a private affair either. In homes with limited water, multiple kids shared the same bath, youngest to oldest, until the water wasn't worth using anymore. It was about staying clean with whatever was available. And when you stepped out, you dried off knowing that the next bath would be just as much work as the last. A broken window wasn't just a nuisance. It was a problem that few families could afford to fix. Replacing glass was expensive, and when money was tight, people had to work with what they had. Instead of a proper repair, wooden planks, cardboard, or even thick layers of newspaper became the next best thing. These weren't temporary solutions. In many cases, the boards stayed up for months, even years. A window patched with scrap wood wasn't about style. It was about keeping out the wind, the rain, and anything else that didn't belong inside. If there were gaps, extra fabric or old coats were stuffed around the edges. In the winter, a boarded-up window made the house even darker, but it was better than letting in the cold. On windy nights, the boards rattled, a reminder that the problem wasn't fixed, just managed. Some families painted the wood to match the house, while others just left it as it was, another visible sign of hard times. For those who lived with them, a boarded-up window wasn't unusual. It was just part of the house. And in neighborhoods where money was scarce, nobody asked questions. Because if you had to choose between fixing a window and putting food on the table, the answer wasn't really a choice at all. Buying soap from the store wasn't always an option. So many families made their own using lard and lye. It was a messy, time-consuming process, but when cleanliness depended on it, there was no alternative. If you had animal fat and a strong enough chemical reaction, you had soap, or at least something close to it. Making soap wasn't for the faint of heart. Lye, a key ingredient, could eat through fabric and burn skin if you weren't careful. It had to be mixed just right, or the final product could be too harsh to use. Some batches turned out smooth and effective. Others left you wondering if scrubbing with plain water might have been a better option. Once hardened, the soap was cut into blocks, stored, and rationed out. A single bar had to last, and if it started getting too small, it was pressed together with leftover slivers to stretch its use. If times were especially tough, even laundry and dishwashing had to be done with the same soap. One bar, multiple jobs. There was no luxury in it. No fancy scents, no silky lather. Just a rough, no-nonsense bar that got the job done. And in households where every penny mattered, smelling like lard was a small price to pay for being clean. In homes where money was tight, a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling was all that was needed. Lampshades and decorative fixtures were unnecessary expenses, and as long as the bulb worked, that was enough. There was no dim glow of a fancy lampshade, no soft diffusion, just a harsh, direct beam of light, sometimes swinging slightly when someone walked by. If you wanted mood lighting, your best bet was standing in the right shadow. Some families got creative, repurposing an old tin can or a cloth draped just right to soften the glare, but mostly you just got used to it. Replacing a burned-out bulb was another story. You didn't toss one just because it flickered. You screwed it in tighter, gave it a little tap, and hoped for a miracle. If a room had multiple sockets, only the essentials were used. Electricity wasn't free, and every extra bulb was another cost to consider. The light might have been harsh, but it got the job done. And if it meant saving money, nobody cared how pretty a ceiling looked. The bulb worked. That was all that mattered. In homes where proper furniture was a luxury, milk crates became the next best thing. If you needed a chair, you flipped one over. If you needed a table, you stacked a few together. They weren't comfortable, but they worked, and that was all that mattered. These crates weren't designed for sitting, but that didn't stop anyone. If the edges were too sharp, an old towel or folded newspaper was thrown on top for cushioning. Wobbly? Just wedge a piece of cardboard underneath. If a crate cracked, you didn't throw it away, you reinforced it with whatever was handy and kept using it. For families without enough seating, guests quickly learned the unspoken rule: first come, first served. If the real chairs were taken, you got a crate. And if you complained, well, you'd be standing. It was about having a place to sit, even if it left grid-shaped marks on the backs of your legs. Milk crates weren't just makeshift seats. They were bookshelves, step stools, and storage units all in one. They did their job, lasted forever, and never cost a dime. In a household where every dollar mattered, that was more valuable than any fancy chair money could buy. Warmth wasn't guaranteed in the winter, but if you had a patchwork blanket, you had a fighting chance. Made from scraps of old clothes, flour sacks, and whatever fabric could be salvaged, these quilts were a history of the family, stitched together one piece at a time. Every patch told a story. That plaid square, an old work shirt. The floral piece, a dress from years ago. Some blankets had fabric so worn that the original color had long since faded, but throwing anything away wasn't an option. When the cold months arrived, layering was key. If one blanket wasn't enough, you stacked them. If a tear appeared, you didn't toss it. You sewed it up and kept going. These blankets weren't about matching colors or perfect stitching. They were about survival. And if company came over, nobody cared about threadbare spots or uneven seams. The goal wasn't beauty, it was warmth. Some of these quilts lasted for generations, passed down with patches added along the way. They weren't store-bought, but they were dependable. When money was scarce, wrapping up in something made from love and necessity, was often the closest thing to comfort a family could afford. A single cup of tea wasn't the end of the road for a tea bag, not when money was tight. Families stretched every item as far as it would go, and tea was no exception. A single bag was used once, then set aside on a saucer or hung to dry, waiting for its next assignment. The second cup might have been weaker, the third nearly flavorless, but as long as the water had a hint of color, it was still doing its job. Some people rationed tea bags by sharing one between multiple cups, dipping it just enough to give the illusion of fresh brew. Others saved up used bags, steeping a few together to coax out whatever flavor was left. Nothing was wasted. If a tea bag finally gave up its last bit of strength, it found a second life, soothing a burn, reducing under-eye circles, or freshening up a musty drawer. Some even swore by reboiling old tea leaves for a final weak brew, proving that even when there was nothing left, there was something left. Tea time wasn't about indulgence, it was about making do. And if you ever had a cup that tasted more like hot water than tea, well, that just meant the bag had already seen better days. Indoor plumbing wasn't a guarantee in every home, and when there was no working toilet, a simple bucket had to do the job. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than trekking outside in the middle of the night, especially in winter. These makeshift toilets were often tucked away in a corner of the house, lined with whatever was available, newspaper, sawdust, or even scraps of fabric, to help manage the smell. If you were lucky, there was a lid. If not, well, you made do. Some families kept an old chair with a hole cut in the seat to create something resembling comfort. Others just got used to squatting. Emptying the bucket was a necessary but dreaded chore. It had to be dumped far enough away from the house to avoid any lingering reminders. Some families had a designated pit, while others took their chances with a nearby field. Either way, someone had to do it, and that person rarely volunteered. A real bathroom was a luxury, but when you had no other choice, the bucket was just another part of life. It was one of those things nobody liked to talk about, but if you grew up using one, you never forget the sound of an empty metal bucket being dragged across the floor. When money was tight, even something as simple as an ashtray wasn't a necessity. Instead, families turned to the empty soup can, a kitchen leftover that found a second life on the coffee table. It wasn't pretty, but it did the job, holding ashes, cigarette butts, and whatever else needed a place to go. An old tin can didn't shatter like a glass ashtray, didn't cost a dime, and if it got too full, you just grabbed another one from the trash. Some people even filled the bottom with a little water to keep things from smoldering too long. Others poked holes along the rim, turning it into a do-it-yourself cigarette holder. It wasn't high design, but when you're improvising, function comes first. The smell of stale ashes and burnt filters clung to these cans long after they were emptied. And if you weren't careful, you might find yourself absent-mindedly reaching for what used to be last night's vegetable soup. Mistakes were made, but lessons were learned quickly. For those who grew up seeing these around the house, a real ashtray almost felt like an unnecessary luxury. After all, when a can of peas could do the same job for free, why spend extra on something that was just going to collect ashes? When shoelaces snapped, there was no running to the store for a new pair. Instead, families used whatever they had: string, twine, ribbon, even an old piece of fabric to hold their shoes together. It wasn't about fashion. It was about making sure those shoes lasted as long as possible. A broken lace wasn't the end of a shoe's life. It was just another fix on a long list of repairs. If one lace broke, you made do with one. If both broke, you got creative. Some kids walked around with mismatched laces, one an actual shoelace, the other a piece of string pulled from an old sack. And if you were really in a pinch, you just tied the shoes tight enough to stay on without laces at all. The results weren't always perfect. Tying shoes with thin twine meant constant retying, and fabric strips didn't hold as well in the rain. But when the choice was between patching up what you had or going without, the solution was obvious. Shoes weren't a disposable item. They were an investment. And if that meant tying them together with whatever was handy, then so be it. Because no matter what kept them on, As long as they stayed on, they still did their job. For many households, turning on a faucet wasn't an option. If you needed water from a well, you had to pump it yourself. It took effort, patience, and sometimes a little luck, because if the pump wasn't primed, you weren't getting much more than a squeak and a few drops. These hand pumps weren't just for drinking water. They filled wash basins for scrubbing clothes, buckets for cooking, and tin tubs for bathing. If you wanted hot water, you had to heat it yourself, one pot at a time. In the winter, the pump handle could freeze solid, requiring a little muscle or some warm water to get things flowing again. When a pump broke down, fixing it wasn't optional. Families patched leaky pipes, replaced worn-out washers, or did whatever it took to keep the water coming. If the well ran dry, you didn't just call a plumber, you started hauling water from a neighbor's place or the nearest stream. Carrying water was part of daily life and every drop counted. Baths were taken sparingly, dishes were rinsed efficiently, and waste was never an option. Running water may have been a convenience for some, but for families still using a hand pump, it was a luxury that remained just out of reach. Moving on from breakfasts, but not completely. Next up, we have the most popular of all, the meatloaf. Here's a fact you never thought you needed. Meatloaves date to 5th century Europe. They came to the USA as a breakfast food in the 1870s, believe it or not. Let's not kid ourselves, the times were rough, people couldn't completely let go of their saving habits, and they were still trying to make the most out of what they had. This dish allowed them to do so while managing to stretch the family food budget. They could mix the meat with what they had in the kitchen and by that increase the nutritional value of the dish. Mix meat with breadcrumbs, cereals, and eggs, and you've got yourself quite a delicious lunch if you ask me. Bread pudding offers a creative solution for utilizing leftover bread in school cafeterias, turning potential waste into a delectable dessert. This dish is typically prepared by cubing stale bread and soaking it in a mixture made from milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla, which infuses it with rich flavors and a soft texture. Often, additions like raisins or cinnamon are mixed in to enhance the taste and appeal of the pudding. Bread pudding is then baked until the top layer caramelizes into a golden crust, contrasting beautifully with the creamy custard-like interior. This dessert is particularly popular in schools due to its economical benefits and the comfort it provides to students. The warm, sweet nature of bread pudding makes it a welcomed treat, encouraging students to partake in school meals while providing them with a source of energy. The introduction of Mexican lasagna in the 1980s showcased the seamless integration of Mexican flavors into traditional Italian architecture. This layered delight swaps out standard lasagna noodles for tortillas and the usual marinara for a zesty salsa, layering ground beef seasoned with taco spices, refried beans, and plenty of cheese. Each oven-baked layer melds into a textural symphony that's both familiar and novel. This dish not only catered to the growing American appetite for global flavors, but also provided a fun, festive twist on the classic lasagna, making it a favored choice at dinner parties and family nights. Its preparation, often involving family members in the assembly process, turned cooking into an interactive experience, further solidifying its popularity. Peach chicken became popular in the 1970s, aligning with an American trend of integrating fruit into savory dishes. This recipe combines the natural sweetness of peaches with the savory depth of chicken, creating a delightful contrast. Browned chicken pieces are simmered with fresh or canned peaches, with ginger and cinnamon adding a layer of spice that complements the sweetness. Additional peach preserves or syrup can be added to enrich the sauce, deepening the dish's flavor profile. A splash of bourbon or brandy is sometimes included, lending a smoky nuance. The sauce is typically thickened with a cornstarch slurry, producing a glossy finish that adheres beautifully to the chicken. This dish illustrates the versatility of chicken as a canvas for flavor, adeptly marrying the sweet with the savory in a uniquely American culinary experiment. Staying in the midst of war, we'll be moving on to bubble and squeak. Bubble and squeak wasn't a specific recipe or a specific food, it was more like whatever you could find in the house. However, it did have one necessity, and that was mashed potatoes. Here's a quick history lesson for you. Not all foods were equally available and accessible at that time. Milk, eggs, and butter, for example, were hard to come by, so you won't be hearing about many cake recipes in this video. But potatoes at the time were easily grown, so they were widely available. Hence, a lot of recipes of that time included potatoes in one form or another. Bubble and squeak was basically mashed potatoes plus anything and everything you could scramble in the house. It was a perfect odds and ends put-together meal. In the hard times of war, there wasn't any space left for throwing out leftovers, so this dish was perfect for finding new ways to utilize what you have left in the kitchen. Sloppy Joes have been a staple in American school cafeterias since their introduction in the mid-20th century. This dish features ground beef or pork that is sautéed with onions and garlic until browned, then simmered in a savory tomato-based sauce seasoned with Worcestershire sauce and other spices. The thick, hearty mixture is then spooned onto soft hamburger buns, creating a filling and flavorful sandwich that is both messy and delightful to eat. The preparation requires minimal kitchen equipment and ingredients that are staples in most school pantries, making it a cost-effective choice for feeding a large number of students. Moreover, the ability to prepare the meat mixture ahead of time and quickly assemble the sandwiches during busy lunch periods enhances its practicality. The familiarity of the flavors, combined with the satisfying nature of the sandwich, ensures that Sloppy Joes remain a cherished option within school meal programs. This festive dish, emerging in American culinary circles in the mid-20th century, cleverly combines the contrasting flavors of sweet pineapple and savory cheese. The pineapple cheese ball consists of cream cheese enriched with finely chopped pineapple, green peppers, and sometimes added ham or pecans, rolled into a ball and coated with crushed nuts. The dish captures the post-war American enthusiasm for novel flavor combinations and party foods that could double as conversation starters. Its popularity at social events can be attributed to both its taste and its decorative appearance, which made it a visually appealing centerpiece on buffet tables. The pineapple cheese ball also illustrates the period's innovation in using canned ingredients, which were celebrated for their convenience and year-round availability, allowing hosts to whip up impressive treats without extensive preparation. Chicken Marengo holds a storied place in culinary history, famously prepared for Napoleon after the Battle of Marengo. This dish encapsulates the essence of victorious improvisation using local ingredients available at the time. Chicken Marengo starts with chicken pieces sautéed in olive oil, braised with onions, garlic, and tomatoes, enriched by a splash of white wine that deglazes the pan, forming a robust sauce. Later additions often include mushrooms, and traditionally, it was garnished with fried eggs and crayfish, though these are less common today. The slow simmering melds all the flavors beautifully, allowing the tomatoes to break down and create a rich, savory sauce that complements the tender chicken perfectly. This dish exemplifies French provincial cooking, utilizing straightforward techniques and local ingredients to produce a dish rich in history and flavor. And now, the dish that stood the test of time and is still made all across the USA, the casserole. Casseroles are the perfect, convenient, cheap, and easy-to-prepare lunch. Just mix all the ingredients into a pan, put it in the oven, and voila! You've got yourself a lunch. This dish was perfect because you could use old veggies and leftovers, and avoid the guilt of throwing out food. Plus, it was amazing for first-time moms because it didn't require any culinary skills or a long preparation time. Casseroles are still popular to this day, and mainly for the same reasons. It is also a dish that is easily adaptable to anyone's food preferences. Whether you're vegan or a meat lover, a nice oven-baked casserole is the dish for you. It's a nice lunch that gathers a family around the dinner table in a matter of seconds. Creamed corn is prepared by cooking sweet corn kernels until tender and then mixing them with a creamy sauce made from milk, butter, and a thickener such as flour or cornstarch. Seasoned lightly, usually with salt and pepper, and sometimes enhanced with sugar to bring out the natural sweetness of the corn, creamed corn is a favorite in school cafeterias for its smooth, slightly sweet flavor profile that appeals to young eaters. This dish serves as an excellent way to incorporate vegetables into students' diets in a form that is generally more palatable to children who may be picky eaters. Its popularity in schools is reinforced by its nutritional content, offering a good source of fiber and vitamins while being gentle on young stomachs. Creamed corn's ability to be kept warm in serving trays without losing texture or flavor makes it particularly suited to the cafeteria setting, where dishes need to remain appealing throughout the serving period. Cowboy stew is a robust concoction traditionally associated with the outdoor cooking of American cattle herders. This dish typically includes a base of ground beef or other meat, combined with a hearty blend of potatoes, onions, beans, corn, and tomatoes, stewed in a richly seasoned broth. The stew's origins are rooted in the practical needs of cowboys during cattle drives across the American West, requiring meals that could be cooked in a single pot over an open fire. Cowboy stew's durability and popularity among outdoor workers underscore its role in the folklore of the American frontier. The recipe's evolution over time incorporated local and available ingredients, showcasing the stew's flexibility and the improvisational skills of those who made it. Minted lamb with jelly brings together the rich, robust flavors of roasted lamb with the refreshing zest of mint jelly, making it a quintessential British dish often featured during spring and Easter celebrations. The long-standing tradition of pairing mint with lamb dates back to medieval England, where the herb's sprightly flavor was used to complement the lamb's slight gaminess. The preparation typically involves roasting a leg or shoulder of lamb, seasoned liberally with salt, pepper, and often aromatic garlic and rosemary, ensuring the meat is juicy and tender. The mint jelly, a blend of mint, sugar, and vinegar, offers a sweet and tangy counterpoint that enhances the meat's deep flavors. This dish exemplifies the classic British culinary technique of marrying robust meat with a vibrant, acidic condiment to create a balanced and satisfying dining experience. Coming to number 8 on this list is chop suey. In the post-war era, ethnic cuisine began gaining popularity. It was an easy way to introduce a Chinese kitchen in the US. The most basic translation would be odds and ends. It first became popular in San Francisco in the Golden Rush era. It also got its place on restaurant menus in the 1920s, but became a popular family meal in the 50s. Chop suey was an easy-to-fix, one-pan dish, and it quickly became a family favorite. The ingredients consisted of meat, noodles, bean sprouts, water chestnuts, bamboo, onions, and celery. If you ask me, it's not very different from the takeout I order on a Thursday night. Macaroni and cheese loaf emerged as a popular variation in the 1970s when schools sought to diversify their menu offerings while still providing comforting and familiar foods. This dish takes the beloved elements of traditional macaroni and cheese, a mixture of cooked macaroni and creamy cheese sauce, and adds eggs and breadcrumbs to bind the ingredients into a solid loaf that can be easily sliced. The loaf is baked until the exterior is slightly crispy and golden, offering a textural contrast to the soft, cheesy interior. This format not only makes serving more efficient, but also reduces food waste, as the loaf can be cut into precise portions. Popularized in American households in the early 1900s, so-tender Swiss steak involves a method of preparing a tougher cut of beef, such as round steak, by pounding or rolling before cooking. This tenderizing process, known as Swissing, lends the dish its name, although it has no connection to Switzerland. Traditionally, the steak is browned, then slow-cooked in a rich tomato and onion gravy, allowing the flavors to meld and the meat to become fork-tender. This dish showcased an economical approach to cooking during the Great Depression, providing a delicious solution for less desirable cuts of meat. The preparation of Swiss steak often became a Sunday dinner ritual, where its slow cooking could proceed alongside family activities, making it an integral part of the family dining experience. Anchovy butter steaks are a bold culinary creation, blending the umami depth of anchovies with the rich flavors of succulent steak. Popularized in mid-20th century America, this dish caters to those who appreciate daring flavor combinations. The steak, usually a marbled ribeye or sirloin, is seasoned simply and seared to perfection. The anchovy butter, a mixture of softened butter, finely minced anchovies, garlic, and occasionally a hint of lemon zest or herbs, is then slathered over the hot steak. This compound butter melts into the steak, infusing it with salty and intense anchovy flavors that enhance the natural beefiness. Here, the assertive flavor of anchovies perfectly accentuates the steak's luxurious richness, crafting a dining experience rich in both taste and elegance. We are going to start by traveling back to World War II America. One of the most famous dishes was onions stuffed with grape nuts. Let me give you a bit of a backstory. Veggies were widely available in the USA since they couldn't be shipped. I mean, you could try, but you would end up with tons of rotten tomatoes. No pun intended. People were encouraged to grow their own fruits and veggies so that more factory space could be freed for military use. One of the most easily grown vegetables was onions. They were easy to grow plus easy to prepare, the perfect combo. People soon started coming up with different recipes that included onions as the main food. One of the most popular ways of preparing onions was stuffing them. Around the same time, grape nuts became quite popular. They were the most basic and generic cereal. Bland, some would even dare say tasteless, and on top of that, contained neither grapes or nuts. So if you combine the strong taste of onions with a crunchy, tasteless cereal, you will get yourself one of the most popular dishes of the early 20th century. Boiled hot dogs have been a long-standing favorite in American school cafeterias, known for their simple, tasty, and quick preparation. Made from a blend of beef and pork, these hot dogs are seasoned and boiled, served in a soft bun with a variety of condiments like ketchup, mustard, and relish. This cooking method is particularly effective in school environments as it allows for hot dogs to be prepared en masse and kept warm. The simplicity of boiled hot dogs makes them a reliable choice for school cafeterias, where the lunch period is often brief and the demand for quick service is high. Additionally, the familiarity and ease of customization of hot dogs meet diverse student preferences, making them a popular and comforting choice. This meal option not only satisfies hunger swiftly, but also aligns with the logistical needs of serving hundreds of students. Introduced during the 1970s in the American broccoli casserole became a beloved dish that cleverly combined the need for convenience with the desire for flavorful meals. This casserole mixes chopped cooked ham and broccoli with a rich cheese sauce, often made creamier with the addition of a condensed soup, which is then topped with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers for texture and baked until golden. This dish exemplifies the era's ingenuity in using readily available, often pre-processed ingredients to create a dish that could serve as a one-pot meal, reducing both preparation time and cleanup. It became particularly favored for its versatility, allowing variations such as substituting chicken for ham or adding different vegetables, thus catering to a range of palates and pantry contents. The casserole's popularity surged as it appeared in magazine spreads and cooking shows, often recommended for its ability to double as a dish suitable for both weeknight family dinners and social gatherings. Lamb shanks epitomize the rich flavors and tender textures celebrated in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisines. Prized for their gelatin-rich connective tissue, lamb shanks transform through slow cooking into melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. The preparation starts with searing the shanks to a golden brown, locking in flavors through caramelization, then braising them slowly in a mix of wine, stock, and aromatics like onions, carrots, and celery, enhanced with herbs such as rosemary and thyme. This method not only tenderizes the meat, but also infuses it with a robust blend of flavors. Typically, the dish is finished with a sprinkle of gremolata, adding a fresh burst of lemon, garlic, and parsley that cuts through the richness. The braised liquid serves as a deeply flavored sauce, reduced to intensify its taste, complementing the richness of the lamb with a perfect balance of flavors. Now, again, I know I said that we're moving away from canned food, but this is more sophisticated. Chicken a la king. This was quite a staple of the classic American home in the 70s. This was a go-to dish for families that wanted to have something elegant yet affordable for lunch. Chicken a la king consists of a creamy, buttery sauce made from butter, flour, chicken broth, and milk, combined with cooked chicken or turkey, mushrooms, peas, and carrots, which add to the texture and the color of the dish, and there you have it. Lunch is served. It was usually served with rice, egg noodles, or some pastry. It was the perfect dish because it allowed families to use any leftover chicken and make a delicious lunch. Chicken a la king was also perfect for stretching ingredients in tough financial times. It was economical and adaptable plus cheap. What more is there? Rice pudding is a classic dessert that finds its way into school menus, beloved for its simplicity and comforting qualities. Made by slowly simmering rice in milk until the grains are tender, this pudding is sweetened with sugar and typically flavored with vanilla, cinnamon, or even a bit of citrus zest to elevate the dish's aroma and taste. The slow cooking process allows the rice to absorb the flavors and the milk to thicken into a rich, creamy texture. Rice pudding can be served either warm or chilled, making it a versatile option for different seasons and preferences. Its gentle, creamy texture and the mild, sweet flavor profile make it an excellent choice for a school dessert, offering a source of carbohydrate and calcium. Cornbread-topped frijoles blends the heartiness of traditional Mexican beans with the comfort of Southern American cornbread, creating a casserole that is both nourishing and satisfying. This dish layers seasoned beans, often pintos or black beans, cooked with peppers, onions, and spices, topped with a layer of cornbread batter that bakes into a crusty topping. Originating from a blend of Native American and Mexican cooking techniques, the dish was adapted over time to include a variety of beans and sometimes meat, making each rendition a local specialty. The dish not only satisfies with its rich flavors and textures, but also serves as a practical one-dish meal that could easily feed a family or a gathering. Cornbread-topped frijoles became favored for its economical use of basic pantry staples and its ability to be prepared ahead of time, making it ideal for communal meals and family dinners. Galantine of chicken is a testament to the elaborate artistry of classical French cuisine, popularized in the 17th century. It involves a meticulous process where a whole chicken is deboned and stuffed with a seasoned mix of ground meat, fats, and spices, including luxurious touches like pistachios and truffles. The chicken is then encased back within its skin, poached in a flavorful stock and set to cool, often in the gelatin-rich cooking liquid, to form a jelly. Decorated with artistic slices of vegetables, herbs, or edible flowers and coated in a glistening aspic, galantine is served cold, making it a striking centerpiece for buffets and banquets. This dish not only showcases the culinary craftsmanship of detailed butchery and seasoning, but also the aesthetic presentation. Now we're traveling through time again, into the post-war era. The time when you would think that people's living standards would drastically change, but you would be wrong. Yes, the war was over, but the battles of everyday life continued. One of those battles was the one with food. Let's take a look at what one nuclear family ate on a daily basis in the post-war times. Let's start with breakfast. One of the most famous breakfast dishes, if we could call it that, was cereals. Cereals gained popularity easily and rapidly, with the kids and with their parents. It was an easy breakfast, no preparation included, and it came with a prize in the box. The parts of society that were extremely poor and couldn't afford milk ate cereals with just plain water. Cereals were heavily promoted as a healthy breakfast, but those myths were suspended quite fast. They are popular in today's day and age also, but not even as close as they once were. Tater tots were born out of innovation in 1953 by the founders of Ore-Ida, Golden, and Francis Neefy Grigg. Utilizing leftover potato scraps from their French fry production, they created a new snack by chopping these remnants finely, mixing them with flour and seasonings, and forming them into small cylinders before deep frying them to a golden crisp. This process not only provided an efficient solution to food waste, but also produced a snack that was perfectly crispy on the outside while remaining fluffy inside. Tater tots are particularly popular as a side dish, but can also feature in recipes like casseroles, making them a versatile component of school lunches. The method of preparing tater tots involves deep frying, which, while requiring careful temperature control to achieve the perfect crunch without burning, fits well within the capabilities of large kitchen operations in schools. Combining two iconic American fast foods, the cheeseburger and French fries, into one dish, the cheeseburger French fry casserole emerged as a popular meal option in the late 1980s. This casserole layers seasoned ground beef mixed with ketchup, mustard, and chopped onions, topped with a layer of French fries, sprinkled with shredded cheese, and baked until golden and bubbly. Introduced in the kitchens of inventive home cooks during the 1990s, This casserole was a response to a growing interest in recreating fast food favorites at home, offering a fun and fuss-free dinner option that delighted both kids and adults alike. Rabbit stew is a beloved traditional dish in various cultures, renowned for its hearty and comforting nature. This stew typically features tender pieces of rabbit slow-cooked with onions, garlic, and aromatic herbs like rosemary or thyme, which subtly enhance the mild flavor of the rabbit. Additional vegetables such as carrots, celery, and potatoes often join the mix, creating a robust, one-pot meal. The stewing liquid, usually wine or stock, enriches the dish, lending depth and complexity as it simmers. Rabbit meat, known for its leanness and delicacy, benefits greatly from the slow cooking process, becoming incredibly tender and infused with the rich flavors of the broth and vegetables. Rabbit stew is especially appreciated during the colder months or in rural settings where rabbit is a common game meat. How many have we got so far? 10? 12? Oh, okay. Coming in on number 13, we have goulash. Again, a dish that has its variants all over the world. Goulash is the perfect blend of Eastern European and American cuisine. One of the go-to dishes for when you want a good meal stretch, something affordable, versatile, and economical, yet so delicious. The ingredients for this magnificent dish are ground beef, macaroni, seasoning of choice, onions, garlic, tomatoes, or tomato sauce, depending on the preference. You could also find some recipes that call for corn and/or bell peppers, but that is optional. It was the favorite comfort dish, easily prepared and perfect for big families. Adding pasta to the meat was a good and economical choice, adding to the flavor and serving, no pun intended, as an economical filler. Finally, we are back to the future, or present. I am confusing myself with this. With these 7 recipes, we'll show that you can eat healthy and on a budget. Fish sticks became part of the school lunch menu shortly after their commercial introduction in the 1950s. Made from white fish like cod or pollock, these sticks are cut into manageable pieces, breaded and then deep-fried or baked to create a crispy exterior with a tender and flaky interior. This preparation method not only makes fish sticks easy to eat, but also appealing to the palates of young students who may otherwise be reluctant to consume fish. The breading, often seasoned with spices and herbs, adds a savory flavor that complements the mild taste of the fish, making it a popular choice in school cafeterias. Fish sticks are typically served with tartar sauce or ketchup and a side of vegetables, providing a balanced meal with proteins, carbs, and vitamins. Their ease of preparation, including the ability to cook them from frozen, aligns well with the needs of large-scale meal production typical in schools. Crab Louis salad, reputed to have originated on the West Coast in the early 1900s, is a luxurious ensemble of crab meat, hard-boiled eggs, tomatoes, asparagus, and iceberg lettuce, dressed in a creamy sauce made from mayonnaise and chili sauce. This salad is often linked with the dining rooms of San Francisco and Seattle, where it was served as a gourmet item in the early 20th century. The inclusion of Dungeness crab, a regional specialty, underscores the salad's connection to the Pacific Northwest's seafood bounty. Its enduring popularity was fueled by the dish's association with elegance and affluence, making it a prized feature on hotel and restaurant menus. Additionally, Crab Louis salad is a testament to the American culinary tradition of adopting and adapting regional ingredients to create dishes that become part of the national gastronomy. Tornados Rossini is an indulgent reflection of haute cuisine, named after the gourmet aficionado and renowned composer Gioacchino Rossini. Crafted by the legendary chef Auguste Escoffier in Paris, this dish features a medallion of beef tenderloin, cooked in butter and crowned with a slice of sumptuous foie gras. Resting on a crouton that soaks up the juices, the tornados is lavished with a rich Madeira demi-glace that's infused with truffles and finished with butter, then garnished with fresh truffle slices. The preparation of this dish demands precision. The beef tenderloin seared to perfection, the foie gras just melting, and the sauce richly coating each component. Tornados Rossini not only showcases the luxury of its ingredients, but also the skill in combining them to deliver a dish that is as opulent in taste as it is in history. I know I said just a few seconds ago that you won't be hearing about many cake recipes, but I didn't say none. I've got something up my sleeve for all of you with a sweet tooth, so listen up. Sponge cake. Interestingly enough, sponge cake has been around since the Renaissance times. The ingredients are pretty typical if we are looking at it from today's standpoint. Flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. Pretty standard, right? Wrong. Those ingredients were hard to come by, so people had to make the cake without eggs and use margarine instead of butter. It wasn't as fluffy as we make it today, but hey, having cake in those times was already a bit of a luxury. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comments if you had any of these items in your homes back in the day.